I said the other day from another platform that within the livestock sector, within the livestock community, for very long, we saw each other actually as competitors, as enemies to a certain extent. Pork versus beef versus lamb versus poultry, and that is actually not the case at all. We are friends, we are part of the same subsector. You know, and I can say it here, and anybody can lambast me, but our enemies within our sector are people trying to pass off grass as meat. And I'm very honest about it. If you want to sell grass, sell it as grass. But don't flavor it as meat and try and sell it as meat. That's the problem that we're having. And it's a massive problem if you look at what's happening internationally. So pork, I'll include you as the other red meat rather than white meat. But you're a friend, as is poultry, and we're working together, I think, very, very good. So we've, in the red meat industry, the cattle, so we serve the industry cattle, goats, and sheep. But we have actually, in the past, let's say 24 months, had a huge transition to where we were in the past, well, since 1996. Now, maybe just a little bit of background. In 1996, when the meat board was disbanded, we created systems and organizations to actually just replace what was happening in the meat board without looking too far into the future. Many of you, and I think most of you sitting here, still remember 1996 and where we came from and into a democratic country. And there were little trust between industry and government. And I can say, sitting next to Dr. Marja, that I think the trust relationship has gone a very long way. Ne? Yes? Yeah? And we've changed a lot of what was happening in 1996 and throughout this time. We've really looked forward. But we understood as an industry, as a red meat industry, that we also had to change. So I'm quickly going to, I don't know, you'll have the, we had to relook the entire vision of the red meat industry. We had to think for ourselves that we had an organization called the Red Meat Industry Forum, which is a forum that was and comprised of about 13 role players. And it was very much separation of the primary part of it versus the secondary part, which included up until the end the consumers, which also had a seat on the RMIS. Now, which is also important to understand that we have a statutory levy. And 80% of our levy was paid by the primary part of the value chain, which included and is up to, we can actually include the abattoir there, because it was paid at the abattoir. So 80% of our levy was paid by the primary portion of the value chain. However, we had more role players on the RMIF in the secondary part of it, which could actually direct the specific direction of which we had to go in the past. And we decided as an industry, as a primary part of the industry, that we would like to have our own levy and decide where we want to be. So you'll see there, we said that the key objectives which we wanted to achieve by changing this was to add 8.3 billion above our baseline if we do these changes. We want to and increase our jobs and the jobs that we have, and grow and measure black farmer share of output. Because other than, or not like other livestock sectors, we must understand that the beef specifically, the cattle industry, is very much more integrated. Although we don't necessarily know, because we don't have a national traceability system, at this stage, we're working very hard towards one, we don't know what is happening in the rural areas and where those cattle go to. Now, the reality is the following. There comes a guy with a bakkie or a truck. He buys these animals from a smallholder farmer or a small farmer or a small-scale farmer, or call it what you want, because this guy only has 3 or 4 cattle. he uploads the two that he wants, he makes up a package and he goes sells it at an auction as his cattle. We don't know where these cattle necessarily comes from because there's no traceability system. However, I am of the opinion that the small-scale farmer has a huge participation within the commercial value chain of the red meat sector. We cannot measure it, and we have to get there, but it is a massive, and it has a massive impact. The problem statement that we have, because within our vision, is to say that we would like to add 250,000 weaner calves from the emergent sector, or the small-scale farmer, to the commercial value chain to grow our industry. We also understand that the commercial farmer in South Africa is not going to add 500, 1,000, 2,000 more cattle to their business. Why? Because they're already efficient. The changes has to come from the small-scale farmer. The changes in the 40% contribution of our sector needs to come. We need to grow the small-scale farmer. Now, obviously, there's a few things we need to look at. And we identified, again, this is it's much more legible when it's closer to you, so you'll be able to read it. If you look at, laser. So we had some high priority cross-cutting issues that we identified. Firstly, I said earlier that we were 13 role players. We didn't have a unified voice. We created a new company called Red Meat Industry Services, which I head up, and that is actually a unified voice with regards to the services that we deliver into our industry. So it's very important, and I'll say that throughout, I do not represent the industry organizations. You might have heard the Red Meat Producers Organization, NARPU, the National Emergent Red Meat, the Feedlot Association, the Abattoir Association. I do not speak on their behalf. I focus on service delivery for the levy payer. Each and every person, and that's important, who pays a statutory levy within the red meat industry, I serve them. We also understand that our industry is highly underfinanced, and we're looking at finance models to increase our levy sector. We've got limited dedicated implementation functions, and we've actually expanded in it. I'll go to that now. We lacked a strategy. We were actually dilly-dallying, I've got other words for it, messing around, doing a specific silo approach. We had silo approaches with regards to the statutory levy specifically. The primary guys did one thing, the feedlots did something else, the NARPO did something, and then obviously, like I said, the rest of the value chain just went on and looking to themselves. But we didn't have a cohesive outlook with regards to red meat specifically, or then the animals specifically. Limited capacity and coordination in state veterinary services with regards to control measures, etc. We saw that as a problem. We still see that as a problem, but we're saying, let's add to it. Let's assist. Not add to the problem, sorry. Add with solutions. And obviously saying that we can help where we can, and want to help where we can. Now that, I actually took out the slide where we were previously because it's very much just silos. But we created this company, this organization called RMPC. That's just the 4 role players. You see them there. We short one there. That's the auctions. So the auctions is currently not part of red meat primary cluster, but the auctions plays a very important role. But we had to leave the auctions behind for a little while because they are not necessarily duty formed at this stage, and they've got a few problems amongst themselves. So we said, if we add them now, they're going to slow us down. We need to run. And we need to take this forward very, very quickly. So there's the RMIS, you'll see it there, Red Meat Industry Services, and all the services that are within the statutory levy application that we brought will fall under the RMIS. Everything will be done under there to the advantage or for the levy payers. You'll see on the right-hand side, we've got the National Animal Health Forum and also the Meat Inspection Advisory Forum. There's a line of separation to the right, and they obviously have a very important role to play, both these sector organizations, and it's included, everybody is included in what happens there. On the left-hand side, I just want to mention that we're busy with a round table. Now, we all face the same issues. The fact that we've got pork and the beef and the lamb and everything here today, but we've got the ostriches, we've got poultry, we've got everybody that is part of the livestock industry that has actually got the same issues. And we're busy with the DG to set up a round table, a red meat, or a meat and livestock round table, not red meat, meat and livestock round table, where we can sit around the table, have discussions with government and ensure that obviously everybody can have one meeting and we don't beat around the bush with 6 or 7 meetings and keep Mpoy out of our meetings. Dr. Maja, thank you, Doc. Maybe this is so I've got a strategy on my short-term interventions up until 2024. I had to restructure the industry, which I think we did to a certain extent with RMIS, a unified voice to government and to the larger agricultural sector, which is an ongoing task, obviously, we're busy with. But we need to be integrated, and I think that's one of the biggest issues that I'm having with regards to data. I think Johan just spoke about the data integration, but within our sector, within our industry, it's a little bit difficult, but not impossible. We just need to go down to where we started with this, get back to our roots, and I think we're on our way to set something up with regards to that. Partnerships, we said PPPs is very important. We're even busy with a PPP with land distribution services, where we're looking at assisting farmers from a red meat side in putting up infrastructure, because we see that as part of what we're supposed to do. Implementation of an industry championed identification traceability system. Now this normally makes people frown, but it's just to say that we know that we're going to have LITS. LITS SA is coming, the traceability system, but if you look at industry and export, for example, we need to couple onto that and have something that creates a standard, which we would like to, and we're busy integrating. FMD high-risk area prioritization, and this is all about things that we need to add value to. Compartments, we said that obviously first we've got a compartment, and I'll get to all of this now, but traceability plays a very important role in compartments as well. Then one of the biggest things which I think is for discussion for today is animal handling facilities. Dip tanks in the rural areas. We see that as a massive possible entry point or contact point between industry and the rural areas. We see that a massive task can be delivered there, and the services that can be delivered at dip tanks. I don't think we've got, how many? 3,000 dip tanks, I think. But that is not enough. We understand that the process at these dip tanks can be bedded. We can look at what's happening there. So there's many things, many ideas that we have with regards to dip tanks, specifically the infrastructure and also the services delivered at these dip tanks. We have to look at cooperatives. That's one of the things. We've got cooperatives, agricultural companies, cooperatives right through South Africa. And at this stage, we're not utilizing their influence within the rural areas. And then vet services obviously is very important to us. And One Health, you see that it's part of our strategy, the whole partnership, and from our side, what we can do to participate. I just mentioned it there at the end, I'm not going to. So this is, and these list of things here might seem trivial. But I think if we sit in a meeting with industry and government and looking at just simple things on both sides, barriers, vaccination, inspections, movement control, there are so many things that we can and cannot do from industry side and vice versa from government side. But it always creates tension in the sense that there needs to be trust. And I think we're building on this trust, as I said earlier, but understanding more than trust sometimes. Because we do not necessarily understand from an industry side, and I'll be the one to say that I can't speak from the other side, but from industry side, we do not necessarily understand, and forgive me for saying it like this, the red tape that has to be dealt with within government. Or the angle of approach with regards to strategy. Because we've got one thing in mind. Yes, there's all of the standards, etc., we want to go to. But the guys at the back of the line wants to make money. They want to go forward, they want to grow, they want to push for this. So the difference with regards to the total strategy is obviously always a point of contention. We just spoke about this earlier, the grazing land and availability. We're busy with a specific project where we're looking at sustainability, regenerative agriculture, within KZN specifically and the Eastern Cape, and getting animals early off the veld and taking them into holding stations of holding facilities. So this actually, at the end of the day, we say FMD, but it's much more than FMD. All those diseases referred to by Dr. Marja earlier, all of them can fit into the structure of this proposed strategy of taking animals, and it all falls under the idea or the heading of sustainability, regenerative agriculture, because apparently that's also important. Now, compartments, one of the things that we can still do within the red meat industry is export, and we're very glad to be able to export. Albeit it's the bigger abattoirs that are currently export, but we still export roughly 35,000 tons of red meat per annum. We consume 96% of our product within South Africa, and 4% is exported. If we do not increase our exports, we are we're backsliding. We're actually in a position where our consumer base is growing, but the annual slaughterings is actually standing still at this stage. We are slaughtering 2.6 million cattle per annum for the past 4 years. It's not increasing. But we must remember that we do not count the informal slaughters. That's just the formal slaughters that we know goes through the formal and the counted abattoirs. And we do know that there are a lot of informal slaughtering happening in areas which we do not necessarily get to. So the challenge is, and that's what I said earlier, to get those 250,000 weaner calves into a formal value chain, adding value to that farmer and be sustainable as a farmer and to our red meat industry. Right, so compartments, very, very important. And that's the only and simple, one of the biggest reasons why we can still export is because we've got something that can be signed off from an exporting perspective. I referred to, or I said about the animal handling facilities, which plays a massive role. I actually referenced AfriVet pilot there. AfriVet has done some of this in the Eastern Cape, and I think it's working very, very well. It's something we as an industry can look at and again, I'm young enough to say this, put our egos in our pockets, or leave it at home and look at what can happen if we work together. Accountability, I think the Animal Health Technicians Act has now changed. There's things we can do there, work with them, utilize them, and obviously, again, I said that Let's SA is and should play a very important role. Now, maybe it's important that we're all on the same page with regards to traceability. Just as a side note, my background is I was a lawyer, so I'd say ubiter, just on the side. Traceability is not a silver bullet. If we have traceability in the red meat industry, we can count all the cattle, we can count the sheep, we can count the goats. It's not going to be the silver bullet to say that now we can export and we can feed everybody everywhere. Not that. It is just a tool. It is just a tool in our hands to do something with. We've got a lot of work still to be done if we've got traceability. So that's the first hurdle to go through. However, we have traceability, but on a very small scale. And it always needs to be a carrot and not a stick, traceability. If we're going to turn this into a stick, we're going to get nowhere. So the intrinsic value will be created through economics. I said about the agribusinesses not going to, and the vet services plays a massive important role. I think the vet strategy, which Dr. Marja also referred to, is also very important. There it still says OIE, but it's World Organization of Animal Health, has a massive part to play. Our veterinarians in South Africa, and again, we don't have enough. Sometimes we treat them badly, then they leave the country, but we need them within South Africa. So, from a red meat industry perspective, what we're saying is, we need to look after the emergent sector. We need to look after what's happening on the ground in the rural areas. We've got a system whereby we can export. How do we make these animals, these farmers, part of the commercial value chain without relinquishing the standard that we have in export. Now, to us, it's not that difficult within the red meat industry. Why? Because our diseases, and we need to, focusing on FMD, for example. I'm not a veterinarian, like I said, I've got a legal background, but it doesn't kill the animals. So there are a few things different that we can do different than other livestock industries. If you look at the whole avian influenza, obviously it happens, it's got a massive negative effect on the poultry industry. African swine fever, massive. And we as a livestock industry, yes, we've got brucella and we've got other diseases which we need to definitely focus on. But our main diseases does not kill the animals within South Africa. So we have to look at our diseases from a different perspective. We have to do what needs to be done to ensure that we not only locally, but also on an international standard, be on an international standard so that we can satisfy the producers, the consumers of our product, of the safety of our product. And again, we do that. But we need to be very much inclusive in the way that we do it, and I think we're working towards that to say that there's much more to be done with regards to cattle, sheep, goat. I don't know if Rory, the guys are back. I've had a discussion with Rory Alcock and Marissa. I think there's a massive advantage for goats within South Africa. Maybe not within South Africa as meat, but exports, we've got a product that we are actually neglecting, and that with sheep. So thank you, Program Director. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, thank you very much.